Public transit. It can be a really good way to get between neighborhoods in a city, or even get across a whole metro area. But can you use it to get between cities that are well over 150 miles away? Well, I set out to find out if you can get from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington by just using public transit. That means no driving, no flights, no Amtrak, and no Greyhound. Theoretically, it is absolutely possible to do so, but in my planning, I was truly finding out how much of a challenge this trip would be. This trip would require dealing with over half a dozen transit agencies and deal with a full day of travel. So I decided to reach out to one of the people who actually inspired this crazy idea. Thanks to Adam for every bit of help, and his video going from San Francisco to LA on public transit is honestly incredible. Even though I'd be covering a much shorter distance, I was doing this all in one day with a hard deadline of being in Seattle by 7:30, as I was catching the train home later that night, so time would be something that I would be keeping an eye on. While I had planned this trip out by myself, I wasn't going to be doing this alone. This is Nick, and I'll just have him describe himself for you.
Cars suck. I run a meme page. I go to PSU, Portland State University. I study urban planning because I've been riding bikes since I was 13 years old, and I'm gonna plan cars.
So when I told him I was going on a trip for spring break and was inviting him, he was all in. We packed our things and got ready the night before for one of the most crazy transit trips I've ever taken. It was early, and honestly I didn't get much sleep from the night before, but I was ready to take on this challenge. We packed the last few things, had a breakfast, and began to hit the road. Or at least for this first section, the rails. The Metropolitan Area Express, better known as the MAX, is Portland's light rail network, servicing the city and some of the surrounding suburbs, and is honestly one of the best ways to get around Portland, whether you're visiting or living here. The MAX is operated by TriMet, which is Portland's main transit agency, which operates buses, commuter rail, and the aforementioned light rail in Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties. But for the first leg of our adventure, we were just taking a quick ride to the center of the city to catch the first of many bus rides throughout the day. And it wouldn't be Portland without the interesting interaction in the early morning at the station, as we struck up a conversation with a man who was excited to hear what we were doing and offered us some instant eggs. And in this world that we live in, that's quite the gesture of support. However, we were full from the 2-day-old donuts I had sitting in my living room, and we politely declined and said goodbye to the first of many characters we would run into along the way. Anyways, after a short 10-minute ride on the MAX, we ended up catching our first bus of the day after only about 15 minutes of waiting in downtown Portland. This is the 105. This route is operated by C-Tran, which is the transit agency for the city of Vancouver, Washington, and most of the suburbs surrounding it. The 105 is one of Vancouver's express buses. It starts its service in downtown Portland, then heads to downtown Vancouver where it makes a couple of stops, and then it expresses once again to the 99th Street Transportation Center, which is where we would be heading to. C-Tran reserves some of its special buses for this express route that caters more towards commuters, with a more plush, comfortable experience than a standard city bus. These express buses were luckily a recurring theme for the day, and my back would be thanking me for it. While this route can get slowed down by rush hour traffic during the day, at this early hour we were absolutely flying up to the north side of Vancouver. This trip flew by so fast, as when we were talking about the next steps of the trip, we just happened to be seated behind a C-Tran employee who wanted to hear all of the details of this trip. While he didn't offer us some instant eggs, he did give us some insight into C-Tran and some advice on the future of the trip. It was pretty incredible seeing the community interaction this early on in the trip, but soon enough, we had crossed the Columbia into Washington, passed through downtown Vancouver, and soon enough, we were arriving into 99th Street Transit Center. C-Tran really invested some good money into the 99th Street Transit Center, and the shelters and amenities here were truly great. C-Tran is a really good agency for a city of its size and has some exciting transit projects in the works. But after arriving here, we had about 45 minutes before our next bus connection would take us to our next stop along the journey. So we did what most Americans do and had a gourmet meal at a wonderful restaurant just across the street from the station. This was kind of unreasonably treacherous due to some poor American road design, but after a little bit of food and a bathroom break, we were ready to head to our next leg of the journey. When we got back to the transit center, we spent about 10 minutes walking up and down it, wondering where on earth we needed to pick up this next bus from. Would this be the end of the trip? only 2 agencies in, just in Vancouver. Luckily, with just 25 minutes to spare, we found a 8.5 by 11 piece of printer paper taped over in the far corner of the transit center where Lower Columbia CAP picks up for its service to Longview, Washington. Lower Columbia CAP is a community action program, which is what CAP stands for, which provides support and service to the more rural parts of the Three Rivers area of Washington, including support for housing and employment services. But today we would be utilizing its public transportation services that it offers. The Vancouver to Longview service is an important link for the region, connecting the cities of Longview, Kalama, Woodview, and Vancouver. Our bus pulled in just a little bit early, allowing us to hop on and pay the $2 fare. Lower Columbia CAP operates a rural transit service through and through, with cash-only payment and a Ford F-450 that had seen much better days. Soon enough, we started our journey north to Longview. While it wasn't a super comfortable experience on board, these rural services are a lifeline for those towns that wouldn't have transit otherwise. And unfortunately, the future of Lower Columbia CAP buses isn't too bright as funding for them ends this June. It was, however, nice to get an appreciation of this rural service before it's gone. But after about an hour on board, it was time to say goodbye to Lower Columbia CAP in the city of Longview, Washington. Our arrival into Longview started at the Longview Transit Center, which is a fairly basic but modern transit center not only for Lower Columbia CAP, but the next agency we would be on. But Longview, Washington isn't exactly a massive town, and this seems right for the city of its size. We had quite a bit of time before our next bus, so we decided to do just a little bit of exploring around the city of Longview. It has quite a lovely main street with turn-of-the-century and mid-century architecture along Commerce Avenue, as well as some surprisingly good traffic calming and good bike parking for a city of its size. But after some walking around and stopping to get a coffee, we decided to catch our next bus. So we then made our way back over to the station to catch it. This would be a short hop over to Kelso, Washington, just across the river on River City Transit's Route 45. River City's transit provides more frequent and local bus service to both the cities of Kelso and Longview, Washington. And riding the bus today was actually going to be saving us $1 as it was National Transit Employee Appreciation Day. Soon enough, our bus, which runs every 20 minutes, pulled in, and we were on our next leg of the journey on this former TriMet bus. Everything was going perfect. We got to our stop early at 10:10 a.m. for what I thought was going to be our 11 a.m. bus. And so we decided to run and get some sandwiches from the grocery store when, just for clarity, I decided to check the schedules for the next 2 legs of the trip to see in horror one of my worst fears. The agency had its schedules posted wrong. Apparently, Lewis County Transit did not actually run an 11 a.m. bus on this route, and there was a gap in service between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. Update from the future, as it turned out, Lewis County Transit actually removed the run that we were going to be taking. It actually did exist up until about a few days before we did this trip. But Lewis County Transit didn't do a very good job of updating their schedules, so in the moment I felt really dumb, but now I just feel very gaslit. This sent me into a frenzy to see if there was any kind of alternative to this plan. Option 1 was to wait till 2 p.m. for the bus, and cut it incredibly close in Seattle with our Amtrak train back to Portland later in the day. And option 2 was to take Amtrak up to Olympia and stick to the schedule, ruining the no transit idea, but still making it to Seattle with time to kill. But after spending as much time as we did in Kelso and Longview, we had seen pretty much the entire area, and just the thought of even having to spend 4 more hours there was just mental torture. So we decided to Amtrak the next leg between Kelso and Olympia. So could we do it all by transit this time? Unfortunately, no. So that's the end of the video. Well, that would be the end of the video if I was a quitter, but actually, I'm not a quitter. I wanted to at least get to Seattle by taking the most amount of transit that I could. And this short little segment would only be skipping one transit agency, because we had come too far at this point to turn back around now. So I booked the tickets and we headed over to Kelso's Amtrak station. The walk there was a 10-minute walk through some of the most car-dependent areas that I had seen on this entire trip, but we made it to Kelso's train station just fine. And it's a really nice place to actually wait for a train. Like many old train stations across the country, it's a small shrine to the peak of American rail travel back in the early 20th century. Kelso Station was almost like a magnet for some more interesting characters while we waited about an hour for the train to show up. From the station attendant who checked in on us to see if we were okay and needed any help, to the guy who complimented my sandwich and wanted Nick to shake his arm out of his socket. The wait in Kelso felt slow, and yet also like a turning point that things were about to go our way again. Before we knew it, we stepped on board our northbound Cascades train, and it was only about a 45-minute ride on board board on one of the best state-supported Amtrak routes before we pulled into Olympia station. I love Amtrak, and this short trip only improved my feelings for it. Comfy seats with a great recline, the smooth ride of the rails, and the staff on board. Our conductor was funny, and we also heard some engineers banter over the mic, and our spirits were good as we stepped off the train to catch our next bus in Olympia, Washington. Now, there's one thing you need to know if you take Amtrak to Olympia, and that the station really isn't in central Olympia. Luckily, there is a bus that would take us right to where we needed to head to. The 94 is the first of the routes that we would be taking with Olympia's transit agency, Intercity Transit. Running every half hour, this bus covers an incredibly long distance east to west. Luckily, we would only be on it for 30 minutes. Even better is that Intercity Transit is a fully free service, so we made our way into the center of Olympia on its modern and fairly cozy buses. The free service also made stops go by much faster, as we didn't have to wait for people to fumble around with cash to pay for fares. And it wasn't long before we made it to the Olympia Transit Center, which by itself is quite nice, with it seeing service from local buses, other rural regional agencies, and Greyhound. The center is modern with plenty of rain cover and shade, and even has an indoor waiting area with bathrooms. The area around the station was a lot less pleasant, however, and we were happy to get on out of there on our next bus, the 620. Unlike the 94, the 620 acts as an express bus, and had quite a few riders on board with us heading closer to the Seattle area. This route runs north out of Olympia, which gave us a view of the Capitol building and would bring us through to the city of Lacey and then into the town of Longwood where we would be getting off. While Nick chilled and enjoyed the ride, I was kind of sweating the whole ride as we had a tight connection to make at the next station that continued to get even more tight as this bus trip went on. I thought this transfer was going to be hopeless and that we would have to wait for the next bus. But as we were about to pull into the last stop on the 620, I looked at my transit tracking app and noticed that our next bus was pulling into the stop directly behind us. Welcome to the State Route 512 Park and Ride in Lakewood, Washington. As soon as those doors opened, we sprinted off the bus and waved down our next bus, making our transfer just in time to catch the very last bus of the journey. We weren't alone with this transfer though. We joined in with a few other people making this connection, who most likely do this regularly, making it an essential connection from Olympia to either Tacoma or Seattle, depending on where their final stops were. This is the 592, one of the many regional express buses operated by Sound Transit, which is one of the Seattle metro area's main transit agencies, mostly operating regional transit from buses to light rail to commuter trains. Sound Transit provides services that make commuting and traveling the Seattle-Tacoma region much easier, and are even equipped with some of the nicest bus seats I've ever been in. I mean, look at that recline. The 592 started by making the quick jump to downtown Tacoma, followed by crawling through downtown Tacoma as we got trapped behind its new streetcar. But after the last stop in downtown Tacoma at Tacoma Dome Station, we were quickly moving on the 5 northbound, passing traffic in the HOV lanes when the sight of Seattle's skyline came into view. What we had been looking forward to was right within reach. Despite how comfy the Sound Transit bus was, we couldn't wait to hop off, and nearly 12 hours after we had started this journey, we finally arrived at our destination in the heart of Seattle. As I walked around Seattle, I couldn't believe how far we had come just by taking public transit. Sure, we had to skip a small section of the trip, but it was incredible to see the wide variety of transit agencies that we took, from systems in large cities that could move millions of people a day, all the way down to the rural buses that move maybe a couple hundred people a week. These services at all levels are essential for people to get around their communities, from going to work to seeing friends or family. There is a wide variety of people from all backgrounds using different kinds of transit and transferring between services that provide these essential connections. Of course, service is generally better within the cities, but that doesn't mean that those rural and suburban services are any less essential for the people that use them. And planning for this level of travel that we did is kind of crazy and chaotic too. From having to manage to keep my phone and camera charged, to making sure that I was getting enough footage for this video, as well as keeping entertained at some times too. Even while traveling with someone, you still have to fight away this ever-creeping feeling of boredom that can form on long layovers or at unpleasant places like a highway-side bus station. But there was also this level of joy and excitement that I felt the whole way, seeing new transit agencies and places that I'd never really so much as looked at further than when I was passing it on a train. It was absolutely worth all of the hype of taking this kind of journey, and I'm hoping to do many more for both myself and for all of you watching watching. Thanks to Nick from Cars Suck for joining me, and thank you to all of my patrons for supporting the channel. Without your support, there's no way a video like this would have ever been possible. And if you want to become a patron and get benefits like early access to videos, extra content, your name in the credits, and more, the link is down below. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and as always, I'll see y'all on the next one.